Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Spontaneous Brilliance Podcast. So I've kind of been going in a train here. I've talked about creativity. I've talked about imagination. And now I want to talk about a word that's in the title of Spontaneous Brilliance. Spontaneous. Spontaneous thought. Spontaneity. This is the basis of everything. I'm wanting to have people understand that the way we educate, the way we innovate, the way we envision, the way we inspire, and the way we create has to be collaborative and cooperative and nurturing and honoring the unique creative genius in each of us, honoring those spontaneous ideas as they come to us. If we are recognizing that we are a unique creative genius, then we have to recognize the thoughts where that genius abides. If we share that genius, then the world can benefit from it. But we can't share a thought that we don't notice. As Mary Morrissey would say, notice what you're noticing. Everyone is brilliant. We have no shortage of brilliance on this planet. We just have a reluctance to offer it and a resistance to accepting it. That is me quoting me. Spontaneity is the key. In order to express your genius, you have to nurture and develop your thoughts. In order to develop your thoughts, you have to notice that you had them. In order to act on it, you have to notice that it's there. And then you have to allow it to see daylight. And that gets us to the crux of a big issue, and that is that most of us don't function allowing our own spontaneity. The dictionary defines spontaneity as resulting from a natural impulse or tendency without effort or premeditation, natural and unconstrained, unplanned. Yes, that's it. That's it. Your spontaneous, unvarnished thoughts, that's where magic lies. Not every thought is magic, but if you don't explore your thoughts, if you don't trust your thoughts, if you don't express your thoughts, then how will you ever find the magical, brilliant ones? The value of spontaneity, of the spontaneous thought, it can't be overstated. That is where your brilliance lies. That's why the book and this podcast and everything is called Spontaneous Brilliance. Because that's the thing that we're missing. That's where your genius is hiding. It's just waiting for you to grab a hold of it and do something with it, to play with it in the imagination, to allow it to meet with your purpose, to meet with your passion, to take action on it, to find the love. Remember that one? Remember that rule? Here on the great stage of life, you've got to find the love. Well, you can't fall in love with an idea that you don't let yourself notice, that you don't let yourself believe in, that you don't let yourself nurture and play with. We so undervalue the spontaneous thought that we don't just not nurture it, but we purposefully blow it off. We ignore the spontaneous thought. We ignore spontaneous impulses because we look for the thought that's going to conform to the structure of whatever system we're functioning in at that moment. Like the educational system, the well-meaning monkeys put together, it is so set up to just squelch those spontaneous thoughts, sit in your chair, don't raise your hand. I was being interviewed for a creativity and culture conference by a woman who's a teacher. And she said to me, your ideas are great, but if I'm teaching English to a bunch of kids and little Johnny wants to tell everybody about leaves and I'm trying to teach them all to write a thesis paper, that they're all supposed to learn to write a paper, and little Johnny wants to stand up and tell everybody about leaves. She's like, I don't have time for little Johnny. I can't do that because then I'm losing what I'm supposed to teach to everyone else. And I was like, well, maybe, but spontaneous thought is coming to Johnny no matter what, no matter whether he's told no, that makes him bad, or He is told, wow, interesting. Okay. And important safety tip, spontaneous thought is coming to every other kid in that classroom. So if you've got 35 kids in that classroom and you're trying to teach them to write a paper in a particular format and present their ideas in a particular format, because that's what you're supposed to teach them, okie dokie. But when little Johnny has that spontaneous thought and he really wants to tell everybody about leaves and dirt, rather than fighting that and pushing little Johnny down and making him wrong for wanting to do that, incorporate that. Say, okay, I tell you what, Johnny, clearly you love leaves and dirt, and clearly you want to talk it. You want to tell everybody that. So I'm going to give everybody in the room a choice. As long as you follow this format, you can write a paper or you can create a PowerPoint and give a speech. That's your choice. And Johnny, you're going to be first to figure out how to take some pictures of the leaves and the rocks and put them into a PowerPoint. And then you can come and show the rest of the class how to do a PowerPoint. Will you come and teach the class next Tuesday? Okay? All of a sudden, everybody is free to recognize their unique spontaneous thought and do something with it. And Johnny is now not blocking you, and you're not blocking him. You are offering into him. You're accepting his offer. You're offering to him. And then when he accepts that, he becomes the master. He becomes the teacher. All of a sudden, this kid who a second ago didn't fit at all is now the leader. Think of how many things just changed. We talked about status interaction in one episode, and I go into it in great detail in the book. Status interaction is something that the great Keith Johnstone taught about in his book, Impro, and how to actually manipulate those status interactions and do it intentionally. Manipulate not being a bad word here, but how to actually intentionally shift status interactions. And if you can elevate a failing student, an inconvenient student, an outcast student into the role of teacher, you will have shifted the status understanding and the acceptance of everybody in that circumstance, not just the two of you. The teachers, a lot of times, they're afraid of spontaneous thought because what if that thought doesn't jive with what they know? So our education system has become repeating back to people what they already know to be true and proving that you can repeat it back in the fashion that they want it repeated back. Our education system is not teaching us to think, it's teaching us what to think. And so before I go too far down that little rabbit hole, which I can go way far down really fast, I just want to say that teachers, when I teach teachers to teach, I'm basically teaching them to improvise. I'm teaching them to really listen to the offers being made by their students, to understand where they need to get to in the story that they are trying to communicate, this education journey that they're taking these kids on. They can hit the milestones. They can hit the signposts along the way. They just don't have to travel in the vehicle that they've been given, you know? It's like saying, okay, people that walk, people that ride bikes, people that travel in cars, and people that travel in a boat that all get to the same destination. We're just going to pick one of those ways being right. It's like the well-meaning monkeys climbing the tree. There's just one methodology that's right. But we're not built that way. We are given these spontaneous thoughts because that's where our brilliance lies. That's where our genius lies. And so spontaneity can't be overvalued. It is where we will find our own personal brilliance. We are all born completely spontaneous. That's who we are. That's what we are as creatures. We are completely spontaneous when we're born. We have a thought, we have a feeling, and we respond to it. And spontaneity, our own process of personal brilliance, is to access our spontaneity in a natural, unconstrained, unplanned way that's both joyful and fearless. And So it's interesting to me that in most of my career, I have been reteaching people how to play, teaching adults how to play, teaching adults how to access that spontaneous thought, how to not censor, how to allow for spontaneity. I have been teaching that for 35 years easily. And it's extraordinary to me that if I ask an adult to pretend something, to imagine for a moment that they're a doctor, let's say, okay? If I ask an adult to pretend that they are a doctor, they'll maybe visualize themselves in the uniform. They'll maybe visualize themselves in a hospital. And if I encourage them to maybe physically act it out, they will not be comfortable doing that because they'll be afraid they might look ridiculous and they might do it wrong, or it might not be interpreted, or they're not good at pantomime and so they don't want to do that or whatever. But if I ask a child to pretend that they're a doctor, they get up and start doing doctor things immediately. They didn't go through medical school. They don't have the right uniform. They don't have the props. They don't care. If I ask them to play, they play. The only children that ever resist playing are children that have been, and forgive this use of this word, but children that have been brutalized out of thinking that their play is good. But play is how we learn. Play is how we imagine. Play is how we create. As powerful as thought is, that's not what we came here to do. We came here to play the role. We came here to do stuff, not just think about stuff. When we have the thoughts, that's what's supposed to get us out there doing. And the reason that adults will imagine the doctorness in their heads and the kids will actually do it is not because the adults don't understand how to play. It's not that they don't understand how to pretend. It's not that they don't know how to act it out. It's that they no longer believe that it's an acceptable way to behave. It's not cool. It's not allowed. And we have to change that. We have to allow our spontaneous thoughts. We're impulsive. We're sometimes irrational. We act on instinct. And then what happens? We learn not to let ourselves do that. There's a time and a place for standing on a chair and screaming, I know the answer, right? And it's usually not in your class in third grade. But if we're lucky, we might have a teacher who expects that each student possesses a unique creative genius and therefore understands that an outburst of, I know the answer, I know, is something to be channeled and nurtured rather than cut off. I began teaching acting and improv in the 1980s in New York. And I was teaching at a conservatory. And so everyone there was focused on deepening their understanding and growing as creative artists and growing as human beings and developing their craft. And I had been an undergraduate in a theater department. And I had gone to college and I loved being a student. Before I studied at a conservatory, I studied in a conventional college. I knew what grading systems were. But when I started teaching in a conservatory. There weren't grades. You either did it or you didn't, right? And when I finally was appointed in a university, then I came smashing straight into a grading system, which really didn't make sense to me in actor training or in a movement class or in a voice and speech class even, right? And I was shocked to realize that the students were really more interested in how they got a certain grade than how to develop and grow and explore and be curious. And I suddenly realized that the students that I was teaching, these adults, they'd forgotten how to play. They didn't want to take chances. They did not want to speak up. They did not want to look silly. They did not want to play. They did not want to explore their ideas. They just wanted to repeat mine back to me in the right way so that they could get an A. And they'd given up on the thought that their learning could come from inside them, that their exploration could come from inside them, that their genius thought could come from inside them. They didn't even consider genius thought was going to come to them. And they didn't expect me to deliver it, and they didn't expect to receive it. Not from me and not from inside them. And they weren't willing to play and mess around just to find out what happened. The joy of learning and the magic of spontaneous exploration had been educated right out of them. And these students that I was teaching were in undergraduate and graduate performance programs, and they were not learning how to think. They were learning what to think. They didn't bring offers of new ideas to class. They didn't build on concepts they learned and make them their own. They didn't imagine that they were just as much their own teacher as I was. They were completely part of the system that the well-meaning monkeys had put in place. They'd not only forgotten how to play, they were afraid to play. It was going to end badly. And these were not just people in classes at the university. These were even actors in rehearsals. And that, hello, talk about your metaphorical situation. These actors on stage were afraid to play, just like most of us are afraid to play on the great stage of life, because we're supposed to be here doing serious stuff. And when I told these students that they had an A, and the only way they could lose that A is if they didn't try, they just blinked and went, okay, but how do I get an A? And I was like, yeah, but you try. You just do your best and try. Explore, experiment. Just don't block the opportunity to try it and be curious about it. And they would still say, okay, but how do I know I'm getting an A? And that was really what started me down this journey that ended up as the book Spontaneous Brilliance, and even this podcast here right now. Is I went into the chair of the department, and God bless him, he was a wonderful man, and his name was Steve Buss, and he just passed away like 3 months ago. And I sat down with Steve, and I was very frustrated, and I said, gosh, what am I supposed to do with these people who are afraid to play? We're in the creative arts. Where did this creative spark go? They're afraid. And he said, well, what do you want to do about it? And I said, I want to teach a class in imagination and spontaneity. God bless Steve Buss. He said, okay. And he said, write up the description and I'll put it in the catalog. And it'll be on the books next semester. And it was. And I taught it there for several semesters, and then taught it in other universities that I would go to. It became a fundamental class that I taught all over the country. And the classes were sort of equal parts improv, technique, and exploration, and imagination and spontaneity exercises. And we did everything from movement improv to sound improv. We played, we did word things. And a lot of times, here's something those students didn't know in those classes. I was making it up that day a lot of time because it was a class on spontaneity, right? And I would see what they were putting out, and I would have an idea about how to get them to the next place. And so I would make up an exercise, and they would assume, because they were educationized, they would assume that I had learned that from someone that had passed it down to me in great wisdom, and then I had learned to introduce that exercise in a certain way to get them to the certain desired result. And yeah, they never knew, except they know now, if any of them are listening to this 30 years later, they know now that I was making that stuff up as I went along. But it got them to where they needed to be. And people took that class in that first university. People took that class that were not just in the theater department and not just in like communications or music or whatever. There were people from geology, there were nursing students, there were engineers, there were people from every conceivable discipline and every conceivable major. And to a person, they entered that class and they went out the other end of that class more confident, more willing to state their ideas, more creative, more inspired, and more profoundly aware of the fact that their life was their responsibility, 100%. And it was amazing that whatever their interests, whatever their talent, whatever their choices to that point, it did not make any difference. They walked out of that class 10 times braver, 10 times more aware, 10 times more playful, 10 times more certain they were capable of more imagining and more creativity and more brilliance than they'd ever imagined. And that's where it started, and that's where it is right now. I'm asking you to play. I'm asking you to take a leap of faith, to just believe that you're going to get an A, that the A is yours to lose, that if you take that leap of faith and you just try each and every day, that you're going to succeed. And that's really what they were trying to do when they were asking me about how they got their A, is they were just trying to figure out how to succeed, how to climb the tree. And I'm saying, you know what? I'm not sure everybody here is going to climb a tree. Maybe some of us are just going to roll around on the ground, and that's okay, as long as you invest in it completely. Organically, all of my teaching has become about asking people to take that leap of faith. I ask them, and I ask you to be willing to believe that if you do something, anything, you open yourself up to the possibility of brilliance. Remember that acting is active, and acting is in life, right? It's about what you do. When you acknowledge that spontaneous thought, it's just giving you the springboard from which to take that leap of faith and act. Take action. Embrace that moment. Embrace any obstacles. Find the love in that moment. Once you use that springboard, then you'll use the springboard again. You'll acknowledge a spontaneous thought. You'll play with it in your imagination. You'll take action on it, and hello, you've created something new. You've shifted a moment. You've made offers into your life that you really didn't think you were going to make. And then once you've done it, you'll do it again. And once you do it again, then you'll be doing it all the time, and you'll realize that it's really where the fun is. It's where the magic is. Lighten up, everybody. Remember, there's a reason why they call that thing that happens on the stage a play. It's supposed to be fun. And we are in a play on the great stage of life. Our soul is the player, playing this character in this beautiful, glorious life that we are imagining into creation. Games are always a lot more fun to play once we understand the rules. And you understand the rules. You know that you are supposed to offer, accept, not block, find the love, embrace the obstacles, make the other guy look good. Take 100% responsibility for your choices. Tell the story. Unite your two selves. Listen to your soul. You can do this. You are doing this. Trust. Trust in the magic of you. Take those chances. Take those steps. Go get them. You got this. All right? And as always, make a bunch of offers into your life. The Spontaneous Brilliance Podcast is brought to you by Miracle Communications Group. Our producer is Michelle Oneida. Sound engineer is Corey Michaels at Corey Michaels Productions. Music is composed by Rex Miller. And I'm your host, Sandra Kavanaugh. You can learn more about me and all things Spontaneous Brilliance at sandrakavanaugh.com or spontaneousbrilliance.com. And please join the conversation here at the Spontaneous Brilliance Podcast by emailing us at podcast@spontaneousbrilliance.com. And have a beautiful, glorious, blessing-filled day.